So I just want to talk a bit today about my helmet setup, kind of some of the why and what behind how I'm doing things. And so in front of you is an Opscore Maritime. I have a lot of time on the Maritime helmet, and I think it's now been replaced by the Fast SF Super High Cut. But regardless, it's essentially the same helmet, just with a few tweaks and some lighter weight. And so I have a lot of time behind this one, and also the Mitch. I think some people call it the ACH now. But nevertheless, I've worn a lot of helmets, but really put in some hours under the Maritime. So that's really the only one I think I can speak with any authority on. And so we'll just kick it off, working from the outside in. And for starters, looking at it, you can see that this is a Cry airframe cover. It's not dedicated to the platform, but some of the Opscore covers are really expensive, honestly. And I had this one laying around, and it fits pretty well. So I didn't really see much of a reason to go out and buy a really nice cover, but you can. If you wanted to shell out coin for a dedicated cover, by all means, there's plenty of good ones out there. And I would absolutely recommend having a cover. I made this one work, just there's that gap for the airframe where the air comes in, but I just put a little strip of Velcro over it and it seems to work pretty well. But I do recommend having a cover for a number of reasons. For one thing, if you're just running a shell, even painted ones, over time you'll develop kind of a sheen on it and you'll get a lot of glare off of the helmet. And then, so there's just, the camouflage component, obviously, but I like having tie down points. I don't really like slick covers, so I can tie things down to the helmet cover. And if you really wanted to, say you're moving through during the day or going to go through tall grass or whatever, you can scrim this kind of World War II style, and it actually is pretty effective. But yeah, so it's a cover, it works, had it around, highly recommend it. So starting on the left side, you'll see I have the S&S Max with a Surefire V1 illuminator. When I was still active, I ran an M1 illuminator kind of Velcroed up here, and I was also running the ARC adapters, which we'll go into that a little bit later. But this is the replacement to the M1. I really like the M1, but this works really well as well. And I know a lot of guys are running like the Surefire Weapon Light IR one. I think it's the M600V. I don't recommend that because one thing I really like about the V1 is that it has a low setting. So if you tap it once, it's high, and you tap it real quick again, it'll go into your low setting. And so if you're messing around your doors or breeches and in real close-up work, that high setting will kind of, I wouldn't say it won't blind you out, but you'll start to get kind of that fixed pattern noise, that hexagonal pattern in your night vision because it's so bright up front. And then it can kind of like glare off of what you're working on. So I find the low setting a little better for real close-up work. But it's still good to have the high setting, right, for searching tall brush, anything you don't want your weapon mounted illuminator pointing at, or if you just don't want to wave your weapon around, that is good to have for searches and things of that nature. But like the S&S Max mount for a couple of reasons. I can adjust the tension on here of this little ball detent thing with 2 screws here, and then I have a set screw in here that keeps it tight into the rail. But I like it kind of like at a medium setting, so I can pull it out, push it around, and if you need umbrella lighting, boom, bingo. And you'll see I have it tied down to the helmet. We'll go into that a little bit later, but slick setup. It doesn't add a lot of width to the helmet, kind of stacks naturally right on top of the rail. And it's just a good light. And I like to have my IRs on the left side because obviously I'm right-handed, and I like to keep my weapon hand on my weapon, because if I'm using IR, that usually means I'm doing some good work, and obviously haven't gone to like an admin role yet. So moving around, I have this little first sphere pouch. I had that laying around as well. I put my battery pack in there, and sometimes some spare batteries or whatever I have laying around or need. But it works pretty well. I think it's designed for the Anvis battery pack actually, but 31 fits fine. And then I have it tied down with some bungee. It's not like a purpose-built bungee. It's just some cord that I had laying around. Twisted it into here. Pretty tight on there. I don't think it's going anywhere. So you'll see I have my cord routed underneath my helmet cover, and coming out the front here. There's a few ways you can do that. I mean, some guys will just tape them over. if you're one of these guys that's having to jump a lot or strip this thing down for airborne operations or swapping helmets a lot, then probably not the best idea. But when I was in, I would route it actually underneath on the side and have it come out here, and that worked really well. But with this, being that I'm not stripping this down really at all, I find it under the cover is the best, most slick setup. And there's just enough play on the end where I can pull it out and plug it in if I need to. If you want a little slop on each side, you have a little give, but regardless, just find a way to get it nice and neat. It's a pretty long cable. So up here I have the Mana Strobe. So there was a plastic cap on this for a while, and the plastic caps in extreme heat or extreme cold tended to crack, and it really came to a head one day when I went to tighten my cap down, and it initiated the overt strobe for whatever reason. So when I would tighten the cap down, it would give me that. So obviously no bueno, but SNS made right on it. They sent me this metal one for free to replace that one, but I knew a few dudes that had that issue. So if you have one of the older plastic ones, just something to look out for there. I have had no issues with the metal one, knock on wood, but I do think the strobes are kind of overrated for most things on a flat range, quite frankly. So unless you're working in a team environment and have a use for a strobe, I would rather have something with a constant on, you know, like a V-Light, or I think Unity makes the Spark, it's called. Regardless, something with a constant on is a little less distraction because nobody wants to be on the flat range with some dude strobing up the place. And then, but if you do feel obligated to get a strobe, the old green MS2000s, I think they can be found pretty cheap and they work great. So they are a little heavier, but BFD, you're not dropping 150 bucks on a strobe. Moving around to the right side, I have a dedicated task light, which has low red, high red, and then white light. This is strictly admin and then casually work. I also run a headlamp around my neck, kind of, you know, 2 is 1, 1 is none type deal. But the reason I like on the right side is, again, I already said earlier that my weapon's on my right side. So it's just easier to take your stupid out of the equation, I guess is a loving way of putting it. But I like to have a dedicated IR and a dedicated white because, you know, if you can only have one, right, it's fine. Like I know they make some of these that have IR settings in addition to white or red or whatever, but in the States, probably not a big deal for most guys unless you're doing like law enforcement stuff. But if you want to maintain kind of a low signature, there's nothing worse that you can do on a really dark night than flip on a white light when you don't need to. So hence why I like to have them very segregated: left side IR, right side admin and or casually work. So that's just my theory on it, but by all means, probably not that huge of a deal for most guys, but just kind of want to explain why I have two. So this one has a white setting, but it's always either off or on IR. That one's strictly for the admin and casually work. On the front here, I have the Wilcox G24 on the old like pink OpsCore VAS Shroud or VAS. I like the silver, I think it looks cool. It's not really tactical, but I had a silver, it's kind of nostalgic. So I would say if you're running a helmet where you're not having to switch these off a lot, I would much rather have a fixed solution to a Wilcox mount. I forget the name of it, but this is actually integrated into the base plate. Like that a lot better because these still will get some slop in between the two, and anywhere I can take away slop, I try to do that. But nevertheless, the only other real addition that I did here that didn't come with this is you can see here that these little carabiner bungees, I think these are actually made for the ACH through Gentex. They're like 20 bucks on their website or 30. But I like these because they act as a tie down to my nods, and they come with these little mini key rings that you can put on your nods and run these clips to. And so it used to be that I would just use some 550 and clip it in up here with an S clip, but with this, I'm confident enough in having those on each side that I think that would work just fine. I think that really the only time you really need breakaway tension is if you're doing airborne operations. I know there's like a poundage rating for most of these things. You do want the ability to break away if need be, but being that I don't really jump out of planes anymore, not a necessity. And so that kind of brings me into the overarching theme, as I talked about earlier, tie down. So there's like this trend out there now where like dudes will like bungee something to Velcro and then Velcro it down. It's like, oh, well, that's tied down. I'm telling you, the second you get into any real thick brush, that shit is gonna peel away. Now, I have lost a few things because, like I was describing earlier, I had to cut them away for airborne operations, or I had to have breakaway requirements, and then would have to go do a full mission profile or something the next day. Too lazy or forgets to time down, and then all of a sudden I'm losing lights in the woods and you never find them again. So I would tell you that if you really like it and if you spend a good amount of money on it, it's good to have a tie down. These are just little cords from the V-Light. You can run 550 cord gut and it takes up next to no space. You don't really notice it. It's not big and ugly. Up here you'll see I do the same with the Strobe. And if I don't want it, I can just loosen the girth hitch and take it right off. Not a big deal. It takes like 2 seconds, and it is a hell of a lot better than just relying on Velcro, because Velcro over time will weaken. When Velcro gets dirty, it tends to separate. And if you're in really thick brush, again, and you're doing some real high tempo shit, it's gonna be gone. That much I guarantee you. So for everything, my Strobe tie down, I got this light tied down. I have the Princeton Tech light tied down. And then with this, with the strip, or with the battery pack, it's not technically tied down, but it's in a pack, Velcroed, bungeed, and then plugged in with the cable routed through the cover. So I'm not really concerned about that going anywhere. Nods tied down with carabiners. And so it's just something that I would recommend to take the extra second and do if you care about the stuff. And guys will be like, oh, well, you know, I use Loctite or this. I'm telling you, it will be lost over time if you're actually using it in an intense way. If you're just going to the flat range and back, or just banging around the farm or whatever, probably not a huge deal, but still, I don't see why you wouldn't tie it down. So Velcro is not a tie down. I'll say it again. Velcro is not a tie down. So just take that for what it's worth. Just know that I've lost quite a few things. Luckily, they weren't on my dime, and so I was easily replaced. But now that I do not have Uncle Sam's money funding my festivities, I would make sure 100% that I have my stuff secure. On the inside here, I have the Lux liner with the worm dial. I think it's great. I have no complaints about it. I know there's better systems out there. I've heard comfort-wise, like 4D pads or Team 1D, this and that. This was in the helmet, and so this is what I run. I do like the worm dial over the OCC dial. I do think it's easier to make those micro adjustments. You know, it's kind of like, you know, when you have a rucksack on your back, you know, every few miles, you're just tweaking it a little bit to change the weight around. Same goes with helmets. You might want it kind of tight for a second. You might want to loosen it up after a few hours, you know, whatever. So it's just good to be able to make those little adjustments. And then having a gas mask extender, most people probably toss these, not even knowing what they are, but I like to clip it on there. That way I always have my extender with me, because it sucks to shoot with a gas mask, not be able to buckle your chin strap, because your helmet's kind of not sitting great anyways with the mask on. So just doesn't get lost and it stays out of the way, don't even notice it. It also comes with these little fleece chin cups that a lot of dudes probably toss. I run my chin strap kind of under my chin, not really on my chin, so it's not really like by the book. But nevertheless, this is nice because these things get really funky over time when you're sweating all the salt and dirt and shit in them. But this is nice because I can just rip the rubber bands off, toss it in the washer, take it back on, and put it on. It's not as irritating, especially if you have facial hair or things like that. But yeah, I mean, this is just my setup. It doesn't mean everybody's got to do it this way, right? But I just figured I'd talk through some of the reasons I have what I have on here. I will go in, I'll do a video on the 31 alphas next, and kind of why I went with those over some of the other ones on the market. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. If you guys have any comments, leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, we're trying to make this more of a weekly or a couple times a week thing. Not looking to sell you anything, not looking to screw you out of money. We just looking to contribute some of our thoughts, our experience, and collaborate with, you know, some good minds out there in the tactical world. So give us a like and subscribe if you like what you saw. Feel free to comment below, and we'll hope to bring some more coming here soon. Thanks.